All right, hey everybody, it's Ed O'Keefe, and I'm super stoked to be here with man, we've been friends for a while, but this is our first time meeting each other.
Meeting in person.
Face to face. This is Nick Norris, everybody. Nick is the co-founder of Protekt products, graduate of, class 247 of Buds. Am I saying that accurately?
Yep.
And that was in 2004.
2004.
Ish, yeah. Which I did the math, and that means I was 28 or 29 when you were finishing Buds.
Uh-huh.
How old were you when you finished Buds?
I was 23.
Okay, so we're only we're only a handful of years apart. Yeah. Entrepreneur, world-class athlete, and I know you're going to cringe. I know you're going to cringe on that.
Subpar athlete. I just tried a bunch of different obscure sports.
Yeah, that's the problem with being with high-level achievers is because, like even yesterday, I was with Dominic Cruz, and one of his teammates, one of his coaches, had said, the thing about Dominic is he was never good at anything. Mm-hmm. He was just, he has like this, and we had a great conversation. We'll talk about this, I guess, more in depth. I don't want to side rail our intro to Nick. I mean, let's talk about Dominic. No, but I mean, you being on teams and stuff, and I've seen your conversation with Andy Stumpf where like he gives himself a C- rating of being in the teams, and you were like, yeah, me too. But that's all kind of crap because maybe, but we'll talk about it.
No, I agree. I agree. I mean, and we could talk for a while about this, but I think that I would frame myself in a similar fashion. Like growing up, I wasn't the best athlete. Yeah. I struggled with a lot of sports. I was a terrible baseball player, terrible soccer player, too small to play football at Carmel. Yeah. And I think it forces you to really dig deep and work hard. I wrestled growing up. I mean,
we're going to talk about that. Yeah. And then figuring out your it factor. Like, where do I blend all this together to become something different? Mm-hmm. And then one of the things that we've become good friends on the fact that we're entrepreneurs, but there's entrepreneurs everywhere. But where I love Nick is you've really dedicated yourself and committed yourself to supporting your fellow, I want to say brothers, but I don't want to exclude females, veterans who are post, whether it's with PTSD, which with its post-service, getting support in many ways. And we're going to talk about that today.
Sure.
But what's really cool is Dominic and I were wrapping up our conversation. I brought up a young guy who's competing at Penn State right now. And I don't want to screw up his name because he's going to be really famous, but Penn State wrestler was already won, Roman Bravo Young. And I was like, Dominic, man, I see these Instagram videos of you training with this Penn State guy, and I didn't know about. Dominic went out and trained for 2 weeks with the Penn State. He said he just got murdered the whole time. But he said Roman is from his hometown. And so after the cameras were off, I was like, man, that's like me and Nick Norris. So like we really connected because you're from the south side of Chicago and Beverly. Same high school.
Yep. Yeah, we both grew up on the south side. I went to Mount Carmel. It's a tight-knit neighborhood. I mean, it didn't take long. I mean, we connected just, I think you reached
out to you. Because who starts a business in the middle of the pandemic? And we both did.
Sure. Yeah. No, but it was super easy to connect with you because, growing up in the same neighborhood, we all know the same people. I think you knew my wife's oldest sister.
Yeah. And her mom and stepdad.
Yep. And then the mutual friends are just all over the place on the south side. I mean, it's such a small place to grow up. I mean, people think of Chicago as being this massive city, which it is. Yep. But, the south side of Chicago is very small town. And, you know everybody. And I think everybody knows what you're doing and who you are. So interesting place to grow up and wonderful place to come back to.
Yeah, I liken it to that without Beverly, Mount Greenwood, and the surrounding neighborhoods of Chicago, which I don't, especially it's more important than ever right now, is that what people don't understand is that when you have police, firefighters, state troopers, you have law enforcement, you have teachers, you have white collar, blue collar. Like I grew up in a family of all electricians, and my brothers and family are all still there. Without those tight-knit neighborhoods, Chicago doesn't exist.
Right.
It just doesn't. It doesn't. The thing, people move out. They're going to be gone. They're going to go to
Yeah.
Indiana. They'll go other places. So Morgan McGarry is a mutual friend of ours, and I was
Yep.
telling him that we're going to see each other, and Brian Schiller, and I mean, we can go down the list. So I want to talk about like kind of your journey into the teams, because the other side of like there's very few people that have come out of Chicago, and ended up there's a lot of guys that went into the Army or Marines, right? But going into the teams is very unique, coming out of the South Side of Chicago, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of friends that are from Beverly that are in the SEAL teams. I know a handful of guys probably chose that path. I think it goes back to, I mean, even kicking off the beginning of this conversation is I struggled as an athlete, and I kind of came into my own as a wrestler. Not that I was a talented wrestler, but I learned how to like really work hard. Discipline was instilled by my dad, and he's the one that really pointed me in the direction of personal motivation.
Yeah. Was he a wrestler?
My dad played football. He played football at Memphis State, and he was a Southsider. He went to like Fenger, Mendel, a couple others. Played for Carmel for like a quarter before he couldn't hack it grade wise.
Is that why?
So
that never happens.
Which everybody makes fun of Carmel. Yeah, right. Yeah, like everybody can hack it at Carmel grade wise.
That's what I thought. Sorry to interrupt you. That's what I thought too. Like I seriously, I'm it's just for everybody who, and I don't know if you know, but I'm the youngest of 9 boys. Yeah. I was the 5th to go to Mount Carmel, and everybody would joke like, "Oh, Carmel guys are stupid," and I was like, "It's so easy to get there." So I remember like getting a 1.8 GPA my first semester, and I wasn't a dumb person, but because I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be so easy," so I goofed around, and I'm like, my parents locked it down after that.
No, I mean, I love Carmel, and my dad really pressed me to, really push myself. Because I could control how hard I worked. Yeah. And, that paid off in wrestling because it's an individual sport. And then thinking beyond that, I really wanted to challenge myself physically. And a good friend of mine, a guy named Mike Hurley, who's a Chicago police officer.
No kidding.
It lives on the South Side.
Yeah.
Mike is the one that he was way into the Marine Corps and the military. He ended up going into the Marines. Way into the military. He's the one that educated me on kind of these different groups in the military, one of which was the SEAL teams. Super difficult process to get into selection-wise, and I fixated on it as a young guy in, I'd probably say 7th or 8th grade. Yeah. And
is that right? So that's young. So he was inspired. He must have been giving you the education of that had to happen young.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Mike knew before I did that he wanted to go into the military, and then I transferred into Cadgeton grade school in 7th grade.
Still there, still strong.
So, like, when we were in 7th grade, Mike and I became really good friends. He's the one that kind of inspired me to look at the military, and I mean, from 7th grade on, I wanted to do something that was really difficult that I knew was an individual pursuit as much as the SEAL teams, as I came to find out, is a brotherhood and it's a team effort. It was really up to me. If I wanted it, I could do it, but I needed to work hard. And the only thing stopping me from doing it was my either lack of discipline, both physically and mentally, or, finding that mental discipline and physical discipline to make it through.
So I'm going to pivot back to high school for a moment, because what most people don't realize is you wrestled at Mount Carmel High School, and my daughter is wrestling now. This is pretty funny. It's not funny. It's awesome. It's like it was out of the blue. Reese is wrestling at Marist. Okay. And I was like, wait a second. So you're going to choose the hardest sport, as a female, and so that's been a great experience. But at Mount Carmel, what most people don't realize is like you were there during the Bill Wick era, right?
I was.
And Coach O?
Yeah, Ron Oglesby.
Yeah, do you know I was at Brother Rice. I was at the Marist Brother Rice meet like literally 2 weeks ago, and I look over and Coach O's at the end of the bench at Brother Rice. Yep. And I had to tell my wife, I'm like, hey, that was my typing teacher my freshman year, and I used the wrong finger, and he's like, failed, and he just kept going, and I was like, Ron's like shortest guy, old guy who like everyone will still say he's the baddest dude around.
He totally is the most badass dude ever. I just talked about him with a buddy of mine from the SEAL teams. You know, we were hanging out with our kids, and I don't know how it came up. I think it came up because the show Fraggle Rock. Do you remember Fraggle Rock?
No, I don't.
Okay, there's a Jim Henson cartoon, and there's these little guys that were construction workers, and they had these little hard hats and little mustaches and beady little eyes, and they remind me of Coach O.
Wow.
Because he's just this little stocky dude that had basically no ears left because he just wrestled his entire life. And the thing I shared with my buddy Brendan is that Coach O was a door gunner in Vietnam. And he always used to tell us, be like, hey, yeah, the reason I became a door gunner is because they said I was going to fit perfectly in this door because I was so little. And I just always thought that was so funny. And he became an inspiration for me. I mean, he was, you know, just a tough dude, instilled work ethic, you know, no excuses. And, you know, I got a chance to wrestle under Coach O.
But, you know, with Wick, during that era, there was Carmel. Carmel now is, I think, top 10 in the country under Alex Zertitz, I think, if I say his name right. He wrestled at Iowa. And the reason I bring this up is because you were, and this goes into the teams about being like personal, you were not a starter, correct?
No, I didn't break the lineup on varsity until I was a senior.
Yeah, which is such an interesting thing. Like, if you walk into a wrestling room, it's almost like that was like your best preparation ever in some ways.
Yep.
Because you had experience. I don't want to use the word failure, but
I would frame it as failure.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Yeah.
over and over again. I mean, demoralizing failure as a young guy.
Well, you know, Dominic Cruz last night, we were talking afterwards, and he said, you know, wrestling's way harder than fighting. And he said, because this is how he explained it. And we were talking, he's like, if a guy can beat you in wrestling, you have nowhere to go. He's like, in fighting, I could change the martial art on him. And like, I'm giving everybody like the 15-second version.
Sure.
It was like a long conversation because it applies to every sport. It is like, well, if I can't beat you head to head, how do I change the context to give me an advantage? Which we could talk about that in warfare, right? You know. Okay, cool. So.
I respect his humility, right? Because I totally understand the concept, but it comes from a guy who is an elite athlete, one of the best in his game.
Bantamweight of all time.
For sure.
So we had dinner last night, and I was like, well, how did you? I went and watched him and Eric Del Fiero train at late night. It was just an hour, very light, but they were just working on Dominic. He wanted Dominic to work on one thing for like 45 minutes.
Sure.
It was just beautiful because it was the most. If I talked about it, it was, out of fairness to them, I'm not going to say anything, even though I don't think they would care. But it's like it was the most basic thing. And I said to Eric, I said, so because he's trained Phil Davis, he's had so many champions come out of his gym. And I'm like, so like a guy like Dom, who's already defended his title 5 times, 6 times, won it back. What are you trying to do? Is it like, do guys just kind of lose efficiency, or is it? He's like, well, the sport keeps changing, but I'm always watching film on how it's evolving, and he's just got to get better at this. It was really simple.
Yeah.
But when we were at dinner, Dom shared about how he went out and back to Penn State's wrestling team for 2 weeks and just got his butt kicked for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. He's like, they just murdered me. He's like, it was 2 weeks just getting my ass handled. I don't know why we're talking about that, but you were talking about humility and humbleness.
Oh, yeah.
So let's go back to you, because I want to talk about Humble Warrior. It's on my list of things, because when I think of you, when I've brought up other people's names who I admire, you've said many times like, oh, he's a very humble warrior. And I'm like, must be a high filter in Nick's criteria of people he admires, like those criteria.
Yeah.
Let's go back to like kind of your journey into the teams, and then we'll get to some of the people I want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I came out of high school knowing that I wanted to be a SEAL.
Yep.
And I alluded to kind of how I kind of found that path. And, I think I chose wrestling specifically because it was a humbling endeavor for me. I didn't wrestle in grade school, which is abnormal coming out of the South Side. Everybody's wrestling when they're little.
Yeah.
So I came to sport late. I went to a high-end program at Carmel, tons of guys that were very accomplished. And I knew it was all going to be about personal discipline, struggling through adversity, and really, I guess, setting the tone for me mentally and physically to go out and try to achieve something that, a lot of people in high school thought was crazy.
Well, I was going to say, especially like coming from the South Side, like I'm sure this is in every community. Like you're kind of nuts doing something like that.
Well, yeah, and I definitely had a lot of people that supported me.
Yep.
But I also had a lot of people that, maybe didn't outright tell me like, oh, you're not going to do that, or like, but they definitely were not supportive. They thought it was kind of a pipe dream, that it was never going to happen. And that actually drove me. I mean, that fueled me to want that even more. Yeah. So ended up going to the Naval Academy. I probably would have enlisted if I didn't think I was going to let my parents down. And ended up going there, picked up a bill to Buds, and, came out here to San Diego in 2003 and started training. And, I will walk back a couple of years when I was at the Naval Academy, and I've shared this story a bunch. Kind of the why behind going to Buds changed for me when the towers fell on 9/11. So prior to 9/11, it was all about, what can I do as Nick Norris to prove to everybody that, basically, like, I'm awesome, I can accomplish something difficult. When the towers fell and I was at the academy and I was watching guys graduate and go to war, it really shaped the why for me. And that was going to be, hey, I'm going to go overseas if I make it through training, and I'm going to lead guys in combat, specifically going into a community like the SEAL teams. It was 100% sure that I was going to be going overseas and serving in combat. So I needed to be okay, and not just okay with, but I needed to want to be in that role as a combat leader, not just because I want to show everybody how awesome I am. I need to be doing it because, it's something that is driving me. I want to be inspirational. I want to be able to help lead elite guys that are probably more capable than me, and that's a lot to bite off as a young guy, specifically going into that community.
I've never heard you frame you wanted to lead, like, so like that's interesting. Like, so that's a shift in languaging too, like of wanting to go serve and fight bad guys. Right?
Sure,
is different than I want to go lead elite warriors in combat.
Well, it started to set in that, like, I'm going to have a responsibility. You going into the SEAL teams, specifically going into the SEAL teams as an officer, I'm going to be charged with leading guys in combat. And when you go into the SEAL teams, you already know that the guys that are going to be in a platoon with you, when you're a new guy and a new officer, are going to be seasoned, very experienced, capable guys that have already proven themselves, have already, probably done at least a platoon, maybe several platoons, and you're stepping into a role as a new guy with no experience, yet it's expected that you're going to be a leader. You're going to be somebody that's actually, accountable for what goes on.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So that's got to be a difficult role, right? Yep. As an officer being put in as the guy in charge, which I think, correct my languaging if I get any of like the military languaging wrong, but like and so how do you, and while you're to lead people, like, you don't get, something I tell my kids a lot is like, one of my kids was named captain of her team, and I said, well, and she's a phenomenal leader and she's inspiring and she inspires me, but I said, like, people don't appoint the leader, like, like, I'm glad you got the captain, but you have a responsibility to, like, people follow the leader, right? It's by behavior, it's not by a title, which our whole world has forgotten right now, but I will leave that to a different topic. So how did you, I think this is such a good topic for everybody, whether it's even fathers of the household, wives, mothers, people trying to get new jobs, of just like, how do you go in, if I'm going to go into a room's probably not the right word, but like, well, it is, and I have to gain respect. They have to follow me because lives are at stake. And also they are better than me in a lot of ways at different skill sets, which a team does. And we got to go get shit done. Yep. So walk me through that.
Okay, so as a young guy,
Yeah.
The one thing I could control was my own performance, and the way I carried myself.
Yep.
So I couldn't control the fact that I didn't have any experience, and I was a new guy. Right, that was reality. It was fact. So I took it upon myself to be the best version of me as a SEAL that I possibly could be. So that started with
That's great. Personal high level expectation and responsibility for your own personal outcomes and effort.
Even in training, right? Like to push myself hard to be a top performer, to lead by example physically.
Yeah.
So I needed to be good at my job. And that a lot of people look at SEALs and think it's all just physicality, but it's a lot of it is kind of your mental capacity, your mental capability.
100%.
So knowing my role early on and then being really good at that role, so as an officer, there are certain things that I was expected to do that fell within my scope of responsibility. And I could control how much time and energy I put into getting good at those things. Mm-hmm. Whereas some guys will get off track and think, hey, I'm a SEAL, first, and I'm an officer, but I want to be the best automatic weapons gunner. I want to work with the snipers. I want to work with the breachers, which is great. It's awesome to understand what all those guys are doing, but understanding your role and being really good at what you're expected to do on the battlefield is what I truly focused on. And I understood what the other guys were doing, but those guys are learning their role. They're becoming experts in that segment of what they bring to the team. So that was first and foremost. I wanted to be good at what I was expected to do as part of the team. And then, and I will say this is not second, it's a characteristic that I hold dear to me, is humility. So being humble, shutting my mouth and listening to other people, allowing myself to be mentored, even, and this is tough for some people to understand, going into a team, a company, an organization, and, being in a position of authority where you're the boss.
Higher on chain of command.
A lot of people have a hard time listening to the people that are going to be working for them. Right. So as a young officer, I had to, it was requisite for me to open my ears and shut my mouth and learn from the guys that had more experience than I did. So I could pick that stuff up and as an officer understand, all the components of this team that I was going to be charged with leading.
Do you think that being a good athlete and not necessarily world class, like, all one state 4 years in a row, quarterback for 4 years, everything, he was the best, like where I would imagine that to have that humility and to try and bring things together would be very difficult if you've always been the poster child.
Sure.
Do you think I guess I don't really know my specific question, but it sounds like, your preceding years going into the teams helped with the humility side and coming out of a place like Mount Carmel, being in a wrestling environment with so many great young men.
Yeah, I think hindsight's 20/20, right?
Yeah.
I look back at it and I would say, yes, I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, life makes sense backwards, right?
And in the moment, the last thing in the world I would have thought is I want to be a mediocre athlete in the Carmel wrestling room, because I was getting my ass kicked day in, day out, by all these guys. And even, having to wrestle off against guys that were younger than me when I was a junior and senior, because there's so much talent in the room. But I think, what it did? I got used to, dealing with failure, and dealing with adversity. And it started to galvanize the person that I became. And it definitely, humility was instilled at me at a young age because of that adversity. Right, I was humbled every time I came in. There was a ton of respect and humility, knowing that I'm going to need to work really hard if I'm going to have even a shot at breaking into a wrestling lineup in high school on this team. So I'm thankful for it, and I think it did probably hone that attribute of humility, which became really important to me because then if I was humble, people saw that and it kind of people respected that.
Do you were there any defining moments, I mean, that stick out in your mind as far as like taking on that leadership role, leading men in combat, that you're like, oh, I'm here. Like I don't know if I've arrived is the right, but I'm doing a quote unquote good job, or I found my path. Like, was there any, like my initial question I was going to ask you before I asked that question was like, was there any defining moments in Buds where, like going through Hell Week, where you just transformationally found like, oh, I can get through anything? And I think you and I've talked about that before. But since we're talking about leadership and teams, was there any defining moments there? And I know I just asked two questions at once, which probably means I'm a bad podcaster.
No, not at all. No, I mean, so, Buds is Buds. Buds for me, there's a lot of leadership lessons that you pull from Buds, but for the most part, half of it is just grinding through it, right? Making it through selection and then learning the basics to be a, kind of the minimum viable Navy SEAL, right? You're not going to be an expert in anything at that point. You're just getting an introduction. When I think about, my first deployment and then, ultimately my deployment as a platoon commander, I don't think I've ever really talked about this, but for me, and this is, I was humbled by it. In 2006, we were doing a lot of daylight combat, so we were atypical for the SEAL teams. We were going out, we were supporting Marine Corps elements and Iraqi conventional elements, doing very.
Was that the clearance blocking? Was that the block by block? Was that? Forgive me on this. Was that Ramadi?
Well, so Jocko Willink and his troop were in Ramadi. We were about 20 kilometers east of Ramadi in another area in Al Anbar. So similar. We weren't as urban. It was a little bit more rural, but we were doing a lot of large scale kind of like clearing, clear and hold, or just patrol. Patrolling to occupy terrain, and which we had to adjust to, but we needed to do that mission because it was in support of the greater mission that, frankly, the conventionals were running. That General Petraeus, really set up.
It was a counterinsurgency to get rid of and build a rapport with the local people living there. Yes, and make them safe. Like the whole goal was make them safe.
You need to be out amongst the people, and people need to be seeing you. I mean, there's important roles throughout the military, but it was a big push to get outside the armor and be out there during the day. So take it back to kind of a point where I really felt honored, is that we were doing these very dangerous daylight patrols where guys knew like, hey, we're going to get contacted almost immediately.
Which, can I interrupt you for one moment? So just for everybody who's listening, like that's atypical of SEALs. Like you guys, you're in special ops in general, is you operate in the dark, and that's your secret weapon, and that's where we.
All my training kind of leading up to that was, gave. The SEALs always had an advantage. I mean, that's the way we train. Even as a new guy, all our training was at night. We're doing raids and direct action stuff at night in training. And we had to start to morph our tactics to be able to support the conventionals the way that we did. And so we're doing these dangerous operations, and the fact that guys were actually volunteering to come with me. So I take probably 6 or 7 of our guys from our platoon, and we would be going out with a bunch of our Iraqi counterparts and doing these, pretty dangerous, high-risk operations. The fact that I had the same guys time and time again basically volunteering to come on those operations, I mean, I think about it now, and I mean, it was humbling. They would choose to do so.
Were they team guys?
Yeah, all
SEALs. Okay, so you're okay, because you mentioned the Marines. I wasn't sure.
But we were supporting them. So, I mean, we patrolled alongside Marines.
Yeah.
A lot of the time we were using our element with our Iraqi counterparts to support, the bigger Marine Corps and Iraqi operation that was going on in the battle space.
Now, in like we just saw how quickly like Afghanistan fell, and so not to create a parallel to that, but I had a question on it from a tactical perspective. Like, are the team guys like pretty much taking like the breach and being the more aggressive side of that when you're working with Iraqi armies on that, or is it more? Are you working side by side throughout the missions,
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends on kind of the intent or like the rules of rules of engagement, but the way that things are structured. So in 2006 in Iraq, it was by, through, and with our Iraqi counterparts, our partner force. So we were partnered up with I guess you would call them like a special operations equivalent of us on the Iraqi side, to help guide them and mentor those guys. And then, there's other times where you're doing, kind of things change politically, and you're just advising, you're training them, allowing them to go out and do the job, where maybe we would stay back. So, the time that when I was in Iraq and then I was in Afghanistan, it was really by, through, and with. So we were getting on the battlefield and actually working in combat with those guys.
So it was high risk.
And a lot of it was high risk because it was daylight.
Yeah. So you were saying, okay, before I took you off guard on that or changed the topic, so you're talking about, okay, same 6 guys going out, and we were talking about moments of leadership, and now it's daylight, we're out. Do you want to continue on that story?
Well, just the fact that guys, understanding that we were going to get shot at, contacted, and that this was not it wasn't the nicest area that we were responsible for. So to have the same guys volunteering time and time again was humbling for me, and actually validation that I was doing something right.
Yeah.
And then, I guess the other example that comes to mind or situation, when I was a platoon commander, I got pulled in by our leadership at SEAL Team 3 to replace another leader that was removed in Afghanistan, and I guess being picked. Typically you're just not, that doesn't happen. Like, you're with a platoon, you do your workup, and then they figure out how they're going to deploy all the platoons. So as an individual, you're not typically picked. The platoon is picked, or the troop is picked to go someplace. So the fact that they needed to replace somebody and I got picked up for that, was an honor, and very humbling for me again. And then going into that situation where, guys, had an officer removed, and having a new guy step into a situation, having to earn their respect, and then ultimately, really, blending well with that group, and earning their respect and being able to execute at a high level with them was a notable experience for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. You and I talked about this, and I'm trying to patch a couple of our conversations together about, I can't remember if it was on the Tim Ferriss episode, which I would highly recommend everybody to go back and listen to that, because you and Tim went into topics that you and I are not going to have time to go into today, as well as even your conversation with Andy Stump with Clearing Hot. Yeah, he's a trip, dude. He's a unique guy. Yeah, I listened to his podcast.
He was on our Afghan deployment in 2010.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and is he a sniper?
Andy was, I believe.
So you were teasing him on the podcast about, you were nice high, tucked away somewhere while we were.
Right, yeah. Well, he would definitely, if he is given an opportunity, he would talk some mad shit back to me.
He's great.
Which I'm sure he will.
I'd like to have him on a podcast one of these days. I have to improve my jiu-jitsu, though, before I go out there, because it sounds like that's all those guys do. What was my question there? So one of the questions I want to ask you was, and this kind of goes in your athletic endeavors and rock climbing, but then with teams and whatever. I don't know if you talked about with Tim, or where you're talking about clearing dopamine. Is that it? Or we're how to handle high stress situations, and why some people have such an amazing ability to go into such intense situations, operate at an extremely high level under that stress, and then repeat and repeat.
So I think, maybe Ben Greenfield and I talked about
that was Ben,
because Ben was really into kind of...
the chemistry,
the chemistry of clearing dopamine, and he was into certain maybe genotypes or certain individuals that are predisposed.
He's funny, man. Yeah, so I introduced you to Ben, Ben to you, and Ben is great for everybody too. Ben was very helpful with my daughter Keegan, and so I consider him a friend, even though I've hired him as a coach at times. But Ben's so funny. He's like, well, I did 4. He'll be like, I took 2 suppositories this morning, and I'm measuring the molecular blood chemistry that by noon, and then I'll report on it by 2, and then I'm going to go in a sauna, and then I'm going to go in the ice bath.
No,
and then I'm going to. He's amazing. He's just, we need guys like Ben.
So he talked a bit about that. I never even I had really looked at it the way that Ben presented it, as far as it being kind of like biochemical, the way, certain people are predisposed to be able to clear dopamine. I always looked at it from kind of personal experience. You start to get acclimated to stress.
Yeah.
And I'll even take it a step further now that I've actually been through kind of this process of healing and kind of moving beyond maybe some of the struggles I had after I left the military.
Yeah.
Looking at, I think, the reasons that I and other guys that served in combat, and let's stay specific with special operations, were exposed to situations young, maybe whether it was traumatic situations, rough upbringing, abuse, whatever, that kind of forced them to deal with stress and be able to compartmentalize it and then still perform in life, having endured some of those hardships. And I've seen that a lot within kind of the group of guys that, I've been, lucky to be involved with as we're kind of healing with, kind of work after the military. And I think that ability to compartmentalize is something that is, I think it exists readily within, at least I can say within the SEAL community and probably within, special operations as a whole. You're just able to deal with stress really well because you're able to compartmentalize emotion and think very clearly and logically in scenarios that, may be overwhelming for somebody that hasn't been acclimated to that type of stress.
Yeah.
So it's like a training thing, right?
Yeah,
so
I almost had 2 stories for you. Like, one was when I did Kokoro camp, which was just 52 hours mini Hell Week experience for like us civilians who want to think we're tough for, but I trained hard for it. But like, one thing I was thinking about you this morning was, and it made me have a level of empathy that I wouldn't have had without that experience, of how much how much they're trying to beat us down, but create a team in like 52 hours. So we had to work together under our high stress, which was was hard. I remember getting home and all my kids coming running up to me in the kitchen, and through 3 doorways, all I noticed was that the baby gate was open, and I went right past all my kids coming to hug me. And I was like, why the fuck is the baby gate open? Like, where's the baby? And my wife looked at me. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, sorry. Like, but it was for that. This is like me eating a Skittle into that world. So I was like thinking about that. I was like, man, and that's not even more than 2 days of an experience, let alone multiple years upon years of real combat.
Yeah.
One more story I want to share with you, I'll flip it back to you, was a buddy of mine calls me, he goes, hey, I know you're into like, the military stuff. He's like, hey, we're part of this Navy SEAL Foundation, so they need some guys to get dressed up and become bad guys. I'm like, really? Oh, this is so fucking cool. Like, what do I do? He's like, just show up. We're in a warehouse in Chicago, and I think it was Team 6 was in there training. I don't know who it was. Like, we don't know who it was, but we were the bad guys.
Yep.
They gave us rifles and like the bullets and the masks and stuff. And the first hour was fun. We get killed and the guys come in. You're like, this is so cool. But I'll tell you, Nick, like my neurology over the rest of the day, I was not liking it. Like, I was feeling like the stress was just getting up and up and up, where I was really happy we were done.
Yep. Because
it was scary to me. Even though I know it was fake and whatever, but these bangs are coming in, doors are getting kicked down, guys are coming on doors very, very quickly and killing us. So I was like, call my buddy Chris, who was in the teams, and I was like, why in the world would you want to be a bad guy on the receiving end of that? Because that scared the hell out of me. Let alone, okay, going back full circle is, so a lot of special ops community and even other veterans,
absolutely,
going through their neurology and their brain chemically having to go through this process and compartmentalizing So do you want to go into that a little bit? Because I want to talk about the healing side of it and where a lot of your focus is now, because that's where I'm leading you to.
Yeah, I mean, I just think compartmentalization is a very powerful tool that can be used to deal with stress.
Yep.
So, I've always looked at the ability to get more comfortable in high stress scenarios as something that can be trained.
100%.
Granted, there is, certain people that are predisposed, maybe genetically or whatever, to that. But I've always looked at it as, hey, you train to inoculate yourself to stress, regardless of what you're doing, right? You don't go out and run 50 miles with no training. You're stress inoculating yourself to the physicality of that event the same way that you
break down and it naturally builds. Break down, it gets built. And then we just keep doing it, over and over again.
So that's, I'm a firm believer in that. And I guess if you'd like to segue into kind of the negative side of that, is that innate ability to compartmentalize, it kind of bleeds over into compartmentalization of emotion for a lot of our guys. And then when guys are leaving the military and soft, conventional, it doesn't make a difference. I look at all kind of veterans, combat veterans. I hold everybody in the same light. We've all dealt with high stress scenarios. We've been able to deal with combat. We've compartmentalized very well. You get out and you start using the same tools to try to be effective in an environment that doesn't necessarily have, the life or death, high stress present. So you compartmentalize emotion, you compartmentalize grief, maybe happiness and connection and joy with your family. It's harder to really connect on the outside because you've gotten so good at compartmentalizing some of these things. And I think that the compartmentalization of emotion starts to build up to a point where, it really starts to wreak havoc on people's lives.
Well, and I would imagine that, even super high level athletes who are trying to compete, whether it's for the Olympic gold medal, your only success, you're getting rewarded for an outcome based on an identity that frankly you don't have anymore.
Right.
And now you have all this stuff you've compartmentalized, or you've built certain strategies to be effective, yet your identity that rewards you for those strategies
is no longer there.
Is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now we go post, and Dominic and I talked about this a little bit because I had friends who have competed at super high levels, and I just know they're very dysfunctional in everything but the thing that they're world class at, and so they have to either evolve or they're going to just continue to struggle. So, in the time remaining, we have a few topics I want to talk about, but one of the things I want to do is, I know something super passionate to you is supporting veterans on post-military experience in life. And so I wrote down a few things. Help me out on this. I look up today, in 2013, suicide rate was 14 out of 100,000. By 2018, it was 28 out of 100,000. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here in 2022 at the end of, hopefully the coming soon of the end of the pandemic. And I would imagine that the rates have only gone up because of the mandates, the lockdowns, the isolation. And I think one thing that I love about you is we've talked a lot about the idea of being a true warrior is like where we need men is to be able to show love and empathy, and grief is okay. Mm-hmm. I have a lot to talk about on this, but I know this is a key focus. So that's a big issue. The pill, pain medication, ease of it. Dana White, it was so funny. Someone was asking him about the drugs that doctors are legally giving people to help with COVID. Yep. And he was like, hey, listen, I could fucking get a pain pill in less time than it takes you to walk out of this room. Right. He's like, there's popping everywhere. And then the third thing was, and then PTSD, which I know this is like a big circular thing. So where are you spending time? Where's the problem? Where are the solutions? And what should people know about?
Yeah, so there's a lot here.
We could do a part 1 and part 2 as well, but let's at least get into some of it here, because I think it's important.
Agreed. Well, you mentioned like loss of identity, loss of purpose, innate
loss of community too.
Loss of community. Yeah, 100%. I mean, so losing those things in addition to kind of the, this problem of over compartmentalization of emotion. And then if you want to throw into this, which I think is very important, is, you know, concussive injury, traumatic brain injury, you know, it creates this perfect storm for guys, you know, really struggling, you know, when they get out. And then the solution when guys get out, you know, traditional solutions are, you know, let's find a quick fix in an antidepressant, maybe an opiate for pain, and guy's not sleeping, so let's get him a sleep aid. So we're basically numbing, or the individual decides to start numbing themselves, you know, drinking more, you know, filling that void, numbing kind of these issues that are starting to surface.
Yeah, it's easy to get pills on the street. It's easy to heroin's rampant,
and and it's a Band-Aid fix for the deeper issue, which is, you know, kind of a loss of connection, a loss of community, a loss of purpose, you know, not having dealt with emotions, and maybe deep-seated grief and loss that has happened, you know, not just in the SEAL teams or in the military, but maybe even beforehand.
And I would imagine that you take all that, and now I got to go back to my wife and kids who they don't understand me. My old friends don't get they don't like. Now I'm like really, it's like a rebound the opposite direction.
Yep.
Yeah, moving away from strategy is what's going to happen.
Yeah. So I mean, my personal story, you know, in brief, is that, you know, I struggled pretty deeply, and I opened up about it with Tim Ferriss initially about post-traumatic growth and kind of my embracing of vulnerability, which I think is a key step. You know, and I'm lucky I started to get to that place even before I took some of these steps with these new modalities in kind of psychedelic medicine. But you know, I got to a point where I was really struggling. Yeah, I was resistant to the typical solutions, the Band-Aid fixes of antidepressants, opiates, and sleep aids. I used transcranial magnetic stimulation, which was a temporary help, not a fix. And then ultimately, you know, connected with a handful of buddies who had been exposed to psychedelics, as in a single psychedelic retreat, a big peak experience.
Is that where wellbeing comes into play, or is it more than that, or you do not want to talk about it?
Well, no, I mean, I'd love to talk about it. So I sit on a board of an organization called Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. VETS was founded by a friend of mine and his wife, Marcus Capone.
Oh, you're sure?
And Amber Capone. And it's one of the leading organizations, philanthropic organizations, that is, you know, paving the way for, you know, psychedelic medicine to be a solution to allow people to find healing within themselves. So grants to allow people to go to a country. Yeah. Unfortunately, a country where some of these modalities are legal, even though we're making a lot of headway here in the U.S. We have ketamine, that's a legal option. MDMA is coming down the pike here quickly, maybe psilocybin a few years later. Don't focus specifically on any one modality. You know, it's really kind of, you know, the individual.
When you say modality, what do you mean? I have a certain, I think, visual, auditory, kinesthetic when I hear modality. So what do you mean by modality?
Modality is just a kind of, I'm using it as like, you know, psychedelic therapy would be a modality. TMS would be a modality. Antidepressants would be a modality. And I guess the other thing too is that these things, you know, what we've found is that it is a multimodal approach. So, you know, vets may grant somebody an opportunity to go through a psychedelic experience, you know, go on retreat. But that individual, it doesn't stop with that, you know, and I'll frame it too as this. It's the way that, you know, vets is advocating for this work, you know, in psychedelics is deep preparation, a very professional, risk mitigated environment for the actual experience, which is a very small part of this, believe it or not. And then deep integration post retreat, you know, really focusing on changing behaviors and routines for that person in a healthy way. So, introducing people to meditation, to breath work, to yoga, to psychotherapy and coaching, to better nutrition and exercise, all the things that you can do for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Because the goal with, I guess the misnomer with psychedelics is that, you need psychedelics all the time, right? And that's exactly the opposite of what an organization like Vetch is preaching.
Yeah. You and I could probably talk about this topic. So like my buddy Ed Clay, who has a hospital with his partners, Dedrick and Scotty Nelson down in Tijuana, Chipsa Hospital, they specialize in immunotherapy. Specifically, they see a lot of cancer patients, but they work with people that are a lot of martial artists and a lot of veterans go down there for stem cells. Mm-hmm. But they used to, so Ed's story, the reason he ended up down in Mexico was because he was a pro fighter, blew out his knee. They gave him pills. He couldn't get off them, hit it by himself. Someone said, "Hey, have you heard of, ibogaine?" And he went down there. But so one of the things was like, Ed was in a really good place. Other than that, he really wanted to get off it.
Yep.
And so when they started their clinic, treating people with ibogaine, looking to get off pain pills, they started realizing that, look, there's got to be so much more, as you call it, integration and life support besides just the acute intervention of, because I was even talking, we're all addicted, right? Especially we're got to be addicted to something.
Oh yeah.
Like I already know you, super high visual, high kinesthetic, like you perform well when you're doing something kinesthetically physical because it helps. It's why you
probably pointed out like one of the things I struggle with the most is identifying with my physicality, like, how well I'm performing, working out or in my sport, which I climb. But in a way, it's called a positive addiction, but the mental stress that I put on myself and kind of the expectations that I put on myself can lead to some negative behavior patterns.
So I said this, and it's a brilliant thing, but from a parenting perspective that I fail at. I said all suffering comes from our false expectations of what we think our kids should be.
Right. No,
and so then you apply it to ourselves. Like all suffering comes from our false expectations of what we think we ourselves
I love it.
should be. It's like, well, I should be there. It's like, well, how are we measuring backwards or are we measuring forward?
Yeah.
I
still struggle. I struggle with that deeply. And I mean, I definitely, that's something where I still struggle. But, to your story about, Ed finding ibogaine as a method to kind of break addiction to pain meds. Ibogaine is probably one of the predominant psychedelics that, guys are choosing to go experience from our community.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons behind that. I mean, I could talk.
We can do another show just on psychedelics.
You could do it just on that and ibogaine for sure. But it's anyway, that it can definitely.
But one thing that I've seen, I haven't, no judgment on that, but like ayahuasca, I haven't done any ayahuasca ceremonies or any of those, and I haven't done that. However, like I've done hypnosis and I've done some other goofy stuff. Goofy, I say it is to traditional thought processes, like where I've been around a lot of guys who just, does energy work? Well, I think it does, I can't measure it.
Sure.
But one of the things is that I see as which I love that you at Vets are doing an integrative full 360 approach, because I've seen guys go down and do ayahuasca ceremonies and 6 weeks later they're going out and doing ayahuasca ceremonies. Yeah. And 6 weeks later, I'm like, wait a second here. Because the challenge that I've seen even in personal development is that when you move the tectonic shift of your value system and identity, everything around you, if you don't have a good mentor and coach, could crumble because now you're questioning everything. Right. And that's where a lot of damage can be done, where there's opportunity for healing in personal development. Yep. And this is just about personal development in general. Like if I start questioning my purpose, well, if I have someone leading me towards like a greater purpose and I'm like, oh, it's based on my foundations, my belief system oriented and my values there, is this who I want to become? Does it support the ecological, like is my ecosystem going to be better in the future because of these changes? Yeah. Okay, those are all the positive checks. But how many checks did I just run through? 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Those are positive checks where it's like, oh, we're just going to shatter this one thing, but you're leaving a gaping hole.
Yeah.
So,
you need to be supported.
Yeah.
And the emphasis with this work that Vet supports is, these things, these psychedelics, they don't do the work for you, and they are a catalyst for personal change.
Yeah.
So you don't go through this experience and have the expectation that my life is going to be perfect now. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to hang out with my family more. I'm going to be more loving and compassionate. This experience will show you what it could be, show you maybe the things that you're struggling with, open your eyes to kind of how you truly are living your life, even if it's super painful, because our brain is really good, and I guess our ego is really good at kind of covering that stuff up.
Yeah.
But then it's up to you to really implement change.
How do people find more out about vets, just before I move on to the next topic?
So vetsolutions.org.
Vetsolutions.org. And what were the name of the founders?
Marcus and Amber Capone.
Let's introduce me to them, because I'd love to have them on the show. I mean, this would just have a whole focus on it.
Yep.
I want to talk about, I have 3 quick questions before we wrap up the show. And then number one is, first of all, thanks for sharing.
Yeah,
today.
absolutely.
I mean, I think it's super important. I was listening to your interview with Andy, and it's the second time I listened to it. And I've listened to your interview with Tim a couple times, and just over the years. And, I think it's really, really important that veterans of all kinds are allowing themselves to have a platform. We can discuss the selfish reasons versus giving reasons, but what I've found is that the people that I admire and follow, whether it's Andy or I'm loving, like I said to you, like Jack Carr's books and his podcast, one of my favorites now, Jocko, the impact he's having on so many people, is that I know there's are you doing it to become famous? I don't even want to talk about that, because the context you and I are speaking about this are more important than that debate. I'll let others have that one.
Yep.
But I know a lot of guys who are super influential who don't share their gifts because they were trained, whether they operated at Dev Group and beyond that, where they were just trained, you don't talk about this. But right now, in our society, we need strong men and women to speak about freedom, about what they fought for, and the leadership, that true leadership. And you're seeing it, whether it's Dan Crenshaw, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard, we need those voices, and guys that served getting into politics and sharing their stories on whatever level it might be, even if it affects just my little 4-year-old being like, oh, Dad, I love it. You interviewed Nick and he talked about being mentally tough. If that's what she gets out of it, amazing. But right now we're in our society believes that our politicians are our leaders. And I have to keep reminding people that know that your father's the head of this household. And it starts in this household. So first of all, thank you on that.
Yeah,
Did you have any thoughts on that as you're seeing kind of the world going through? Do you?
I do.
I have any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. I mean, there's a difference. There's a difference between telling telling war stories and sharing, lessons learned. And I think that the positivity that comes from sharing lessons learned, because there's so much value in the experiences that, combat veterans that have served for the last 20 years can bring to this society at large, that, a lot of our society has not served in combat. They haven't experienced these things and learned these valuable lessons. So when somebody is the right person, the right personality to bring those lessons to bear, like a Jack Carr and a Jocko and an Andy Stumpf, and the list goes on.
The list goes on,
of positive people.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think it's bringing value to society. And people, there's always going to be debate, and there's always going to be people hating and jealousy and all of that. I think when it's not about them and it's more about enacting positive change in this world, what's the damage there?
Yeah. It's really interesting. So I was talking to one of my buddies who was in Delta, and we were having dinner one night, and he told me about, we were talking about snipers, and he said, well, snipers are the most selfless guys. That was his phrase. And I was like, what do you even mean by that? And so like that, I think would be great to interview somebody just on that topic. And I'm reading a book. It cost me $100 to get this book. It's like only 20 pages long. It's called Greatness. And
good marketing.
It's such good marketing. It's such good marketing. But he talks about the greatness is selfless. It was something about selfless leadership. And I forget the rest of the phrase, so I'm not doing it justice. I'll do a separate podcast on just this topic. But it really struck me as being a 46-year-old man, 7 kids, trying to be better. And so if instead of me like showing I'm better, is me being more selfless.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the path to greatness that we just aren't, like we see the Michael Jordans and we see but we don't, and we hear the stories of Kobe being up at 4:30, but like the selfless guy who's the team captain of, like I'll give you a quick example. Like when Michael Phelps won his like 10th gold at the Olympics, and then the announcer goes, okay, the team captain, they pull the guy from behind everybody. And I was like, who the hell is that guy? I'd like to learn his story, because how does he become the team captain when here's Michael Phelps winning 10 gold medals? You know?
Yeah.
I just think it's, as a dad and...
well, I think that you're going to influence more people through your own actions, the way that you carry yourself, as opposed to just telling people how they need to be. So I think that the most powerful thing that we, I guess a public figure can do is embody kind of what they would like everybody else to be and set the example, right? I mean, if you're setting the example and other people can see that, the only way that people are going to change themselves is if they feel like they want to change, and they need to be influenced by people and see positive examples.
Without shame, without guilt.
Yeah.
We just threw, 100%. Okay, two more quick things. So I got Protekt products.
Yep.
I'm going to pitch your products. Where do people get them? I love this. Where's my packs, man? So I got my brain stuff here. So you co-founded Protekt products with
my brother-in-law, who's actually married to my wife's identical twin, both a Naval Academy roommate, Tim Duba, and a guy named Mark Healy, who is a prolific waterman, big wave surfer, spearfisher, and bow hunter. He actually does a lot of work with Sitka now. But yeah, we founded Protekt as basically a one-stop shop to improve overall wellness. And in Protekt, we focus on better hydration, better sleep, and overall wellness improved by getting outside.
Where's my packs at? Where's my immune packs at?
I think they're on the table right now.
So what's awesome about it, and we got our Black Rifle coffee. Now, I know you're buddies with these guys, but I was going to joke and say, thanks for bringing more coffee. Have you done coffee enemas?
No, I've not.
They are the best thing for your liver. We're gonna have a whole. My buddy, this is hysterical. But when you're like, "Hey, I'm gonna bring you tons of coffee," I'm like, "Awesome!" So this is Black Rifle coffee, perfect for your next coffee enema.
Better you than me.
Yeah, no, I mean it's amazing. But what I love about these, like personally, and this is not a pitch to it, but like I told Nick before I came here today, I'm like, dude, you gotta give me your. I ran out like energy. Hydration, and these are liquids that go right into my drink. So I got them all over my place. So what's the website? Just so we make sure.
Protekt with a K. So protekt.com.
Yeah.
And you can find us on the Instagram as well.
Awesome. And then, so we got that. And then you used to be very involved with the CK4 Foundation.
Yeah, C4 Foundation.
C4 Foundation. Yep. Can we pitch it while I want to pitch it?
Yeah. A wonderful organization helping out active duty families on the NSW side of the house.
Yeah.
Providing a place for families to get together and kind of build connection.
In honor of Charles
Humphrey Keating IV is a friend that was killed in combat in Mosul several years ago.
The documentary it's on YouTube, everybody. You got to go watch it, and please support them because it was inspiring. I mean, I cried, I think, twice watching it. It was very inspiring.
It's kind of hard not to.
And his dad's doing a lot of great work out there. Yeah, and a lot of the vets are doing a lot of great work.
Wonderful work.
Awesome, brother. Well, I love you.
Love you too.
It's our first time being together. Please support Nick. Follow him. Vets, Protekt products, C4 Foundation. And please share this with people. This is a lot of deep stuff that I think goes way beyond just supporting our vets, but like high performers, dads, moms, kids dealing with like there's too much stress right now in our anxiety in our world that's being imposed on them, unfortunately. And so these strategies, I think, are just only going to become more important as we try and do better. So that's it, everybody. Thanks for watching the show. Appreciate you. And Nick Norris, everybody.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Fucking killed it.